Our Old Testament reading this morning is Psalm 49, verses 1 through 12, concerning the folly of trust in riches. To the leader of the Korahites, a psalm. Hear this, all you peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the harp. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of my persecutors surround me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. Truly, no ransom avails for one's life. There is no price one can give to God for it. For the ransom of life is costly and can never suffice that one should live on forever and never see the pit. When we look at the wise, they die. Fool and dolt perish together and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they name their lands their own. Mortals cannot abide in their pomp. They are like the animals that perish.
Our gospel reading today is from the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. So someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbiter over you?" And Jesus said to him, "Take care, be on your guard against all greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns, and I will build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I'm so glad, as I said, to be with you all this morning. But I want to be completely honest. I don't preach very often, and I also don't love this parable. I think it's a little bit of a bummer, and I don't spend a lot of time, as I said, preaching. So I spend a lot of my time with middle and high school youth who have decided flat out that I am completely uncool and I don't know anything about their lives, which is both really fun and incredibly challenging. So when I was preparing to preach, as I typically do, I have a couple of pastor friends who I regularly check in with when I'm preparing a sermon. They've both been preaching for close to 20 years. They're both very good at preaching. They're well respected. They really love to preach. So I thought that they would have some good insight on this text and would have some good ideas for me. So I reached out to my first friend and I said, I have this text. I thought you might have some good ideas. It's like kind of about greed, I think. And she said, "Ashley, I always skip this passage." Okay. All right, well, I'll just ask my other friend. So I reached out to my other friend who's a head pastor, and he's been preaching for 20 years, and he had just done like a year-long series on the book of Luke, and I thought he's definitely got to have some ideas. I reached out to him, and he said, Ashley. Passages like this are why I have interns. So no one was able to help me. So I started to read the passage again, and I realized I think I understand why we're a little bit skittish and weird about passages like this. This is a really intense parable, and at first glance, it has no payoff. I mean, why does Jesus even tell us this kind of grouchy, mean story? He gives the punchline in the first part. He says almost immediately, "Be on guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Like, okay, thank you, Benjamin Franklin. This is like super secular advice that we could get from the Farmer's Almanac. So then it seems we would follow and hear a story about an obviously evil and greedy man. But the man in this story is not obviously evil. He's not obviously greedy. We don't hear that he acquired his land illegally. There's nothing in the story telling us that he's exploiting the poor or running over widows. Those are kind of the go-tos when Jesus calls folks greedy or evil, right? All we get is that the land of a rich man produced abundantly. That's like the American dream. In Bible speak, that's like saying he did everything right, things went well, and he made some money. He doesn't sound particularly greedy. He sounds kind of normal, like maybe lucky, maybe a little bit successful, and maybe like a guy who's contemplating how to plan for and spend his retirement enjoying the things that he earned. I struggle to say that this guy is even greedy. He sounds reasonable. He sounds kind of wise. But friends, that's not all there is here. Things get dicey when this rich man opens his mouth. He starts saying, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. I will do this. I will pull down my barns, and I will build larger ones, and there I will store my grains and my goods." It's just there under the surface. And it's actually in the grammar of the text. It's there that we begin to hear a more disturbing, more corrupt story. And it's there that we have to pay attention. In the opening line of this parable, it says, "The land of the rich man produced abundantly." And there's nothing wrong with that. But in other words, the subject of the sentence is the land. His wealth and his prosperity came from a source other than himself. But he doesn't acknowledge that. And then he goes on to talk only to himself. I'll say to myself, "Self, you've got a lot of grain. Self, maybe you need to build some bigger barns before, self, you really take off into retirement." This speech is not just to move the story along, but it's an intentional device to actually reveal the condition that wealth has left this rich man's mind in. See, in this text and in other occasions in Luke, when there is a monologue like this, it's actually a particular rhetorical device, and it's meant to demonstrate the human will in defiance of the divine will. But it's not super obvious, right? This man isn't like taking down what God told him to do and then openly deciding to do something different. It's more sinister. It's more difficult to see. His wealth, maybe even unbeknownst to him, has made him narcissistic. It's made him self-referential. It's made him isolated. It's made him alone. He's unable to see or care about anyone other than himself. Commentator Scott Horsey calls this a double failure. You see, not only does this rich fool fail to see God, but because he's unable to see God, he's unable to take note and to be held accountable by all the reminders of God that surround each of us every day. There are things in our world that disclose to each of us a greater story than the story inside our own heads. This rich man's most conspicuous lack of vision is towards the most important reminders of God in our world. The most important reminders of God in our world are other people, other image bearers, our neighbors. So while greed is certainly part of this story, I don't think it's the most important part. I think the invitation here is to more than just working on our relationship with our possessions. God called this man a fool because he was lost in his own economy. He was lost in an economy where he made investments and returns only to himself. And I think that's a place we can all find ourselves in. We're only talking to ourselves. We're lost in our own selves. We are functioning in one way or another as if there is no God. We might find ourselves rich or wealthy in the world's ledgers, but we are unable to be rich towards God. Remember, in God's strange economy, it says, "Blessed are the poor. Blessed are the grief-stricken." God's economy says that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. In God's economy, a poor carpenter from Nazareth led with love and died a criminal's death. And that poor carpenter's resurrection loosed the grip of death on the world. In God's economy, barn doors are broken down, and instead of building bigger ones so that our surplus can be contained, we are to share the surplus so that no one goes hungry. God's economy calls us outside of and beyond ourselves, but we might miss this. We can miss out on this strange economy if we, like this rich fool, lose sight of the reminders of the presence of God around us. If we begin to look only at ourselves and not at the other people around us. I'm supposed to talk to you about the work that I do. And I have found this strange economy happening in my work. My pastoral calling is to a new worshiping community called the Voices of Jubilee. We are a team of incarcerated young people, returning citizens. Those are individuals who have experienced incarceration and are now on the other side of that, and they are living in the world, rebuilding their lives. And then there are people like me, who are followers of Jesus and longing to hear a word of liberation. And our community accompanies these incarcerated young children and their families in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And since 2018, we have met with these children. We started meeting with them at Bon Air Correctional Center, and we also meet with them at Chesterfield Juvenile Detention Center. And we meet with them, with these children who are as old as 20 years old and as young as 11. We meet with them for pastoral care and for fellowship. And we testify to their goodness and their belovedness. And we do our work in a number of ways. We sing together. We do advocacy. We do enrichment. We provide funds for scholarship. We provide financial support. But most of all, we are a presence. But I want to be clear. When we started out, my co-pastor and I had absolutely no idea what would happen. We only knew that the next right thing to do would be our plan. In 2018, the youth at Bon Air Correctional Center requested a gospel choir. And this might come as a complete shock to you, but I am not in any way qualified to lead a gospel choir. But that was a joke. the Holy Spirit brought us a young woman who was gifted in that way, and we were able to raise money to support her in that work. And gradually over time, we began to see God all over the place. Instead of the traditional image of a volunteer coming in from the outside that we had in mind, God brought us these returning citizens, these people who had served time in the Department of Corrections in Virginia and had come home from being incarcerated. And though we as a ministry are in no way rich in the world's economy, we found that we were incredibly rich in God's economy. As these returning citizens had come home to build lives for themselves, instead of building their own barns to contain whatever they have selflessly given their surplus. And this is a surplus of hope. This is the kind of hope that persists even in a system that tells 11-year-old children that they are worthless, that incarcerates them for running away, for missing school, for being harmed by the adults in their world. But these returning citizens are sharing love and are serving as mentors to these young people. And I've seen God in this persistent hope, and it is sustained in community. Persistent hope is required for survival in the kind of system that we are showing up in. Much like the Roman Empire, it is required for survival. And in fact, I have seen this surplus at work in specific ways. And there are too many ways to count, but it comes in the words that are spoken over and over again to these children. You will be okay. These are spoken to children who are told over and over again that they are anything but okay. The first time one of our mentors spoke these words, it was outside a courtroom after a particularly brutal hearing for a young boy who was being moved rather violently and unjustly as a 16-year-old from the juvenile system into the adult system. There was a horrific hearing. He was shamed by a judge, and he collapsed into sobs on the floor of a courtroom. After witnessing this travesty and walking out into the hallway, I was in no mood to hear platitudes. But one of our mentors came to me and said, "He will be okay." This was no platitude. These words were a surplus of faith. This was richness towards God. This was persistent hope from my friend Paul, whose land had produced abundantly. You see, Paul had been sentenced in the 90s to life plus 25 years and was told that he would never see the light of day. But over time, through a series of almost miraculous events, he was paroled about 5 years ago. And in a sense, like the rich fool in our parable, his land produced abundantly. And rather than build larger barns, moving as far away as he could from the system that tried to take virtually everything from him, including his life, rather than considering how he might live out the rest of his days in comfort, he has seen his good fortune as abundance to share. So since his release, he has gone back 2 and 3 times a week to encourage and talk with men and women and children who are locked up. He has joined every effort to improve the conditions of incarcerated folks in our Commonwealth. And he has built a community of returning citizens who are unimaginably courageous and filled with strength and grace. So when Paul walked up to me in that hallway and said, "He will be all right," it was descriptive of what would be, because Paul knew what we would all share. And friends, this is what has been. After that hearing, Paul reached out to folks he knew behind bars to receive and surround our young friend as he entered the adult system. And our little community of faith continued to reach out through the phone and emails and video chats and every way we knew how. And since that hearing, we have been able to carry this young man. And our young friend, whom Paul first told me he will be all right, though he has certainly struggled at times during his adult incarceration, has been all right. Because he, unlike the rich fool in our parable, has not been alone. Friends, at first glance, this rich man's methods of survival certainly seem smart. They seem safe, they seem secure. In commentaries, though, a number of scholars like to quote St. Ambrose and Augustine on this passage. They say things like, the things that we cannot take away with us are not ours. Compassion alone follows us. And the rich fool did not realize that the bellies of the poor were much safer storerooms than his barns. Perhaps there is simply a message of compassion and generosity in this parable. But I believe our parable makes it clear that there is even more for us here. This rich fool is caught. He is stuck. He is alone in ways that aren't the ways of Jesus. And it's not just that we as individuals should strive to be generous, should strive not to be greedy. I believe that Christ offers us more freedom than that. Christ offers us encounters with those around us to share what we have. We are baptized as ones who can be rich towards God. We can find ourselves in community as God's beloved, surrounded by those who also bear God's image. We can be caught up in a different economy. We can be in an economy that is marked by the one who loved most lavishly, abundantly, and most with joy. And we can trust in the one who has told us that no matter what, we will be all right. Amen.